G'day. This week I've got a development on the butt clamps I made a few weeks ago. I thought about this a bit and thought, can they be used for corners? And the answer is no, but that set me thinking, and so I've come up with this. I don't know whether anybody else has come up with it, and I'll show you how it works in a moment, but it's another one of those little things that if you do a bit of fabrication, particularly with thinner sheet, it might come in handy. Now, on that butt clamp video, I got a few more dislikes than I normally would from that, and so I just wanted to say to people, I'm not at all, dissing on this old Tony. I think he's a wonderful guy, got great respect for him, but it was just an opportunity I had to do something a little bit different based on what he'd done. So yeah, no disrespect there. If Tony is watching this for some strange reason, by all means, give me an email if you're upset, and we'll talk it out. And if you want to take the opportunity to do a return match for this video, once again, feel free. How do these things work? Well, that's one of the butt clamps I made up, and that's quite simple. The screw pulls on the blade, which pulls on the bar. So that's how the butt clamp works. The blade has pulled the bar in towards the base here. That all clamps up, and then you can come along and you can tack. Not a problem there. The problem with that is that I don't do that much, do that many butt joints. So what would really come in handy for me is one that does corners. Now, this is what I come up with, and if you wanted to do a 120-degree corner or something like that, all you'd need to do is, instead of making that angle 90 degrees, make it the angle you want. Okay? But the way that works, similar principle, nut pulls up the blade, but in this case, it's pulled up by the blade goes through the cylindrical part here, and that pulls up against the base, and so that holds that at a 90-degree angle. I've made a whole bunch of small parts. These are the spacers. They actually fit the drawing, so that's all good. I've got my little stainless tabs, and they're going to go down there. And I've got my bits of stainless studding, which I've put a slot in, as per the previous ones, and that'll just go on there like that. Come along and put a little bit of welding there. The other possibility too, if you hadn't got access to a welder that will do that sort of thing, is you could just drill a small hole in there and say put in a 2mm roll pin or something like that. Trim it off, it'll do the same sort of thing. All you're wanting to do is basically anchor this piece to the studding. There is a slot that goes in there, but I'm going to do that afterwards, just because the more material I have there, the easier it's going to be to weld up. If I have a slot in there and then try welding there, there's a good chance I'll just basically slag that corner off. Not that it matters too much, but prefer not to do that if I can. The other thing that I need to make up is these blocks, but that'll be in a moment. It's rather hot today, so I wanted to try and do the welding as soon as I could, and then worry about the machining part. Here, for want of a better term, are my flag screws. So I've ground as I did with the previous ones, I've ground the weld down so it's pretty much in the profile there. Looking at that, I might have to do a little bit more. But the next thing to do is do a bit of a cutout, roughly like that. And that way, that can pull on the cylindrical spacer piece that I've got. So I'm going to do that just with an angle grinder and a thin disc. I'll mark them out, and then I'll just come in and do a succession of cuts. It's only around about 4mm wide, and I think it's 12 deep, so it's not a big thing, and that will then pretty much finish these off. One of the problems with this particular project is I didn't read my drawing carefully enough, and you may notice this in the video that originally when I made up these, that slot was right on the edge of the bolt. What I didn't realise was that once the cylindrical part was on there and that was pointing up, the end of the sheet was running into where the bolt was, and so it had put a gap like that in there, which was no good because you can't bridge that very easily. So what I've had to redo is these things. So basically cut off the old tab and put in a new one, which was just a little bit longer. I also had to make a few changes to the blocks, but they were relatively minor. These are my V clamping blocks. So they're basically a V with a slot in there for the tail of the flag to go down. There's a hole there for the bolt to go through, and then it's counterbored just to allow for any welds and all that sort of thing around. I've made 6 of them because if I've got a seam, it's probably going to be a reasonable length, and I'd like to get it clamped up really tight so that I can tack it and make sure it doesn't move on me, particularly with aluminium. A bit of uneven heat, it'll move. Better to have these things every 75 millimeters and put a couple of tacks between than have them too far apart and have things buckling and moving in between. These could be a little bit shorter, by the way. I've just got it so that hole is symmetric, but the flag isn't symmetric, so that could be shortened by 5-6 millimeters, I think it is. I've put the V grooves in these blocks. I've also done a hole, and in hindsight that was maybe not such a good thing to do, but it's there. So the V grooves were pretty straightforward, just putting them up on an angle, and off I went. I'm now putting the slot in. Now, originally I calculated this out and worked out where the slot needed to be, and I didn't get that bit wrong, I got another bit wrong, and so I'm now having to deepen these slots. So slitting saw in the vise with the stop there to bring it to a depth. I've got a parallel which I use just to make sure that's level. I've also got another scrap block sitting down the end here. And I find when I'm doing particularly prototype type things, having a few extras around the place that you can scrap and not feel that you've got to go back to restart is a good idea. But that's evening out the pressure, and the reason for that is that I had a slitting saw shatter on me, and I think it was a combination of perhaps feeding it a little bit too fast. The cutter was blunt, but also I'm wondering whether this moved in the block, because I originally had this set up like that but without this block here, and so it may have been it just wasn't held well enough, and so that's what caused the problem. However, we're moving past that, and so that's the next step. Once I've done that, I'll be coming in with a 7/16 cutter just to counterbore that, and then it's a matter of just putting those what would you call them, flag bolts in there, and we're pretty much done. Do they work? Well, that's a joint with a couple of the butt clamps there, and I just put a couple of tacks there. Nothing terribly wonderful. I think that tack's about to come loose, but it shows the general principle that you put the clamps on, a couple of tacks, take the clamp out, if I can get this one out, there we go, and that holds that together, and then you can run along a full bead along there. The gap is not too bad because it gives you a chance for a bit of extra penetration, but you do need to watch that, and that's one of the reasons why these are 1.2, and if I could make them thinner, I probably would in hindsight. How's the angle work? Well, that's the angle there. So that's, once again, that's held, and I could run along there and put another bead in there. One of the interesting things about these is because the cylinder, the bush, whatever you want to do, sits on like that, what you could do is have that sitting in the joint, tack there, loosen that off a bit, slide it forward again, tack there, and so on and so on. So you can get by with 1 or maybe 2 clamps. One thing I have done here is, you may or may not be able to see that, but instead of that being flat, I've actually got a slight apex on that. The idea being is that when the sleeve goes on, if there's a little bit of misalignment, it's able to rock around and fix that. The other thing about these is these are cylindrical, and that was just because I had a bit of bar stock and I couldn't think of any other reason why not to. But if you put a slight crown on there, you could use it actually to hold curved pieces. So for something like the mudguards that I made up, I could have used something like that to hold those in place while tacking. And in fact, one of the reasons I first thought about these things was for that particular reason. And there they are. Corner clamps that allow you to put a row of tacks along the seam, ready for welding, and hold it nice and secure. If anybody has seen some of this commercially, please comment below. But other than that, thanks for watching, and see you for the next one.